What's happening new today, Heidi?
Not much. I'm enjoying the sun and weather warming up for this little bit of time while we're here.
Cold on the weekend.
Yep, I know. I'm not looking forward to that.
Hope you have your garden all covered up.
It will be nice to have a garden.
Yeah. They say it's going to be in the 50s in Albany.
Yeah, I heard that. Some spots are going to get frost this weekend.
Hmm. So I think I told you that some mining folks have been calling around operations to find out if they've been open, and secondarily, have they had any cases with COVID?
Yes,
So that's kind of interesting. They
very.
don't seem to be doing anything with it. They're just talking about it, and
Yeah.
it's not an enforcement piece. Just making phone calls, and I don't know if they're putting together a survey or just busy work or what.
I don't think all of them are back to work in the field yet.
I don't really know. I was on with our DOT folks out in Vermont, and he had said that there's extensive work going on in the DOT world with federal DOT working with companies, compliance, et cetera. He's just been very, very busy.
Wow.
Bringing off the hook. So I haven't really noticed any more DOT inspections or enforcement, but
No, I haven't noticed any DOT inspection points, but I haven't done a lot of driving lately either.
yeah, but no more than normal I haven't seen.
Right.
Maybe even less, at least in these couple areas on I-87 where we drive a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that area between 19 and you is always going.
Yeah.
It's like just beyond the bridge there at north.
Yeah. Just before 17 there, yeah. Or 18 if you head north.
We're close to noon, so I don't know. It looks like on my end it's actually 12 o'clock on the dot. Are we ready to get rolling?
We are ready to get rolling. We'll start off. Thank you everyone for joining us. Challenges of creating a safe work environment. As we know, this is a Zoom meeting. We're in the webinar portion, so if you have any questions that come up while we're in this webinar, please feel free to post them in the question and answer box. We'll get to as soon as we can. We'll try and answer all the questions that come through. We do have a little change in our agenda today. One of our speakers, Richard Wabi, is not able to join us today. So it will be just Scott and myself for today's webinar.
He's probably dealing with all that DOT stuff I was just talking about.
He probably is.
Some job site, having to put up with all that stuff. Well, that's no problem. We can get rolling. And Heidi, frankly, this category is one that you can jump in on anything. You probably know as much as I do about it, and Richard. So we can go back and forth on the areas that we want to talk about with both you and I, if you'd like.
Okay. Would you like to kick us off with what it means to have a positive safety, a culture around safety, and how it might be different from what companies actually think about safety?
Yeah, I mean, let's start there. Obviously, the challenges of creating a safe work environment, and whether we need to leave the slides up or not, it makes no difference to me. But this has been the topic of discussion in the world of safety since the beginning of time, long before I was involved with it. And it's something that companies are always striving for. We call it world-class safety programs, right? A lot of us think that we have a world-class safety program. I don't really know what that means. And a lot of time the measuring stick is a little bit off. Do we have injuries? Do we have fatalities? I mean, what makes us world-class? And it's a very big category. And I don't know as if it's over not confusing for us, but ultimately we've got to have top lines of communication. We have to all understand that unsafe acts is a big portion of our issues in industry as it relates to risk and safety and policy and procedures, because we have people in the mix, and they don't always follow the policy, they don't always follow the procedures, and they're not always overly engaged with what we're trying to put forward. So this is a challenge, and I think there's hours and hours of conversation that we could have on the topic, but the goal really is to have a tribe-like or a culture-like, this is the way we do things around here mentality. And that requires everyone to have complete buy-in and engagement where they're willing to come to me or you and say, look, I got a question or a concern. Maybe you can help me out versus just kind of run with it. So those are some of my initial thoughts anyways on kicking this off. And I think that's the direction that we need to go in. I don't know what you think about on that, Heidi.
I think you're right. It's definitely a culture that has to, the whole organization has to buy into it. What's your thought on if the whole, how do you get to that point?
Well, you got to have complete buy-in from the management straight down, which is a extremely used term, but it's got to be about the safety and the quality and the production, those three categories as we go through this process. It can't be all about production or all about quality, or certainly not all about safety. It's got to be a combination. And we've got to make sure that we're pulling this all together and looking at total engagement. And when you have highly engaged staff that are producing good quality products and doing it and managing the risk, right? Not necessarily safety, but managing the risk. And there's a big component there in my mind. Generally speaking, on the backside of that, you have a good product and it's being done safely because they're engaged in the process. So we should look at some of the roles, which I know is another area that we want to get into, and the roles of the different people and how that plays a role. Management, owners, operators, supervisor management, all the way down has to make sure that we're providing a role model mentality to all this. 85% of what our staff is doing is role model. If they see me climbing on the top rung of a ladder, telling them they can't, that they're just going to do the same thing I'm doing. So we have to make sure that we follow that protocol. And I think that there's some stuff where, Heidi, you can jump in on here too, is that if we look at just this last 6 months, this is going to be a paradigm shift in itself in my mind. And we should really look at ways of taking this and using it to our advantage. And if Richard was on the call, I know he'd go down this road as well. When we think about this, just exactly what we're doing, virtual meetings, Zoom discussions, using our cameras more, being involved on job sites without necessarily going to the jobs, but it blends a little bit on our roles on how we can manage this. And don't you think, Heidi, that we can utilize some of this technology to really be in front of the people a little bit more and help with that engagement piece?
I do. I think that it opens up a whole new avenue for some of the companies who might have multiple locations, and it's a little time consuming to get to each of those locations. Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever platform you're using, open up new avenues to be able to check in with that team and talk to that team in a real time, maybe see that site, take a look at it without putting in the hours and the drive time.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of operators that are utilizing things like I'm the supervisor in the field and I can take a video with my camera and talk. It could be a safety supervisor, let's say, that I can't be right on location, but I'm a supervisor. I'm working with my supervisor in the field. They're taking video and talking about their job. They got some trenching going on or some confined space or some elevated work areas that they got to work in. And then you can have a back and forth conversation to be engaged in the process with the job safety analysis, let's say. And then that process can be shared with the rest of the staff, even perhaps with me on the phone. It could be totally done virtually. So now that I'm involved, and I can let them know some of my thoughts on that process. So there's a lot more engagement that way, in my mind, using when we talk about our roles and this stuff, we can change the way that we do it a little bit to get that increased engagement.
What do you see as the role of, say, it's just the worker that's out there? How can they start this process or, get buy-in on this?
The worker themselves?
Yes.
It's all still on the idea that they're comfortable with coming to the supervision on the job and asking questions, and then adding those other layers and components backwards. Your opinion, when you bring it to me, your opinion and your ideas and your thoughts seem to count. That's important. You get buy-in with those staff. You're looking at their ideas and their thoughts. We even call this in the fringe, right? There's some fringe ideas and thoughts that maybe can be thrown into there, or maybe we table a thought. So that's going to help encourage that engagement versus just totally ignoring those ideas and those thoughts that they bring to the table, or right back at them and more like a shark bite by saying that's a stupid idea. We would never try that. You're going to totally lose that engagement. I don't know if that's kind of the direction you're thinking in, but that's what I think we need to be doing.
right. And every single person at the operation needs to have their ideas brought forth and look at it and be all judged in the same way.
Right, right. Challenges are endless. It's Scott Geller is someone that we've all spent a lot of time talking to and reading on and listening to in the safety environment. And he, back in the 80s, came up with this idea of unsafe acts. It's really where it came from back in the safety history. And most of us looked at that stuff. And I frankly still subscribe to that idea. You're dealing with people and you got to continue to evolve. And that's always going to be a challenge. You're always going to have to shift and adjust. I was a little off topic. I was at lunch with a investment guy who's a friend of mine and just talking shop, and he was making some comments on some of the younger people in his office, how everything they do is virtually. You know, you say, hey, John, what are you going to do today? Well, or this weekend, I'm going to get on and play some games with my friends. Well, they're not getting around a table and playing Madden with a Sega where four of them are sitting in front of it. They're on headphones, they're virtually talking. They're not even going to leave their house, their basement. That's their total interaction. So they're sucking up some of these ideas of working virtually and the videos and interacting inside of these training programs or on a tailgate talk where you can pull people in. So it's just there's some challenges that make it different, but I think we can certainly evolve in the right way to continue to get the engagement.
And outside of using some of this new technology, what are some of the other ways that you might be able to get your staff engaged or even accountable for what's going on?
Well, accountability is a big piece, and we've got to hold people accountable and it makes sure that they understand that they see it, they need to act on it, and they need to do it. And a lot has gone on in the safety industry where someone will approach me and say, "Look, I think you should wear safety glasses while you do that task." And my first comment is, "Mind your own business and stay out of my job. I've been doing this for 30 freaking years. I don't need you to tell me how to put safety glasses on." We've got to change that when they see it and they're trying to own it and solve it and they approach me. I got to have an open line of communication. Say, you know what? I forgot. Good idea. Thanks for caring about me and a little back and forth there. There's a level of empathy, and a lot of people in our industries, construction, and I don't know everyone that's on this webinar particularly, but generally speaking, in the blue collar world where we're talking about safety a lot, manufacturing, construction, mining, we've got a lot of rugged, tough individuals, men and women out there who don't really feel that empathy is a component they should be capitalizing on. They look at it as too feminine, if you will. I get that a lot, but there's a huge component there that's got to be done to get that engagement and to have that involvement. It's all around empathy and it's all about caring for each other. So big component. Accountability is part of what you mentioned, holding yourself accountable and holding each other accountable.
You're right. Empathy does play a big part of it. Even just explaining to that person why you might want them to do that, why you're asking them to do it in a certain way or looking for something to be handled in a specific manner, then that explains to them, lets them know that you care about them and that you're asking for it for a certain reason.
Right. And so lots of stuff there that we can certainly play with and continue to work with. But again, a lot of our conversation right now is this 6-month moment that this COVID has brought some different things to those of us that are in a little bit different generation. I know that our organization has trained well over 7,000 people virtually since March. Prior to March, we probably trained about 10, right? Maybe I'm wrong, Heidi, but right. 10 people. It was a struggle to get on a webinar or do any of this stuff. So it's certainly changed the way that we look at it, and there's good ways to use this technology.
Now you mentioned looking at JSAs and things like that for the safety culture. Are there other things like timelines or paperwork that should be looked at to do that as well?
All of it needs to be on the table. It all needs to be looked at and analyzed and kicked around and stirred up across the board, right? And we can get into any of these categories. The tailbox talks, the annual training, the constant communication. We don't need to wait for an annual training to have a conversation about Scott not wearing safety glasses, which we talked a little bit about. So the constant open door policy is the key component to this stuff. And we have to always remember and fall back on, we can't be complacent with the fact that, which we started off with early on, are we world class? I don't know what world class really means. I hear companies say it, and I'm with people that we got a world class program. Well, again, I don't know how you measure that. It's and it gets confusing sometimes. So in my mind, it's like anything else that we do. It's like an athlete. We're always looking to improve. If it's 1% or 0.5% every week, whatever it might be, it's always a little bit of improvement. And that's the constant challenge of creating a safety culture, minimizing risk and exposure. Is always working to improve, never get complacent thinking that just because we didn't have any injuries or fatalities or citations, however we want to measure this in this last 6 months, that we're now world class. So we got to be cautious with that.
Okay. What are some of the ways you suggest to help break down the walls of some of those who are resistant to this, who have that rugged mentality?
This open lines of communication.
Okay.
That's what you're thinking, that
Yeah.
back and forth, that barricade they got up there. They're the classic, good morning, how are you? Well, what's it to you, right? As they're spitting on your shoe. Okay, so that kicks off my morning really well, or a day. The process of pulling that all in can be cumbersome. There are pieces and puzzles to this, but the overall involvement is a key component. And we have to at least, this is going to be difficult to even really figure out in these times, but if we just forget all of the COVID stuff and the difficulty finding people to work, et cetera, and we just focus on the conversation at hand, there could be some people inside of our organization that aren't going to evolve. Right? We call this the 80-20 rule. I like to even break this down further, that there's a percentage of people who are really high performing for your company. There's another percentage of people, let's call it about 60, right? Maybe instead of 80-20, let's look at 60% of our people are really good at what they do and they want a good leader. And then there's another number down in the bottom that might be 10, 15, maybe even 20% within an organization that they're never going to come to the table and be engaged in anything that you try to bring to them, including safety. They almost could sabotage the entire program. You have got to figure out a way to keep them from doing so, up to and including you may have to look at replacing them and moving on. And again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this conversation in general, just based on the times, but there is a percentage of people that'll never come around. The time, I would think that Heidi, you would agree that some of that is changing. There's an awful lot of hard-nosed people that we've worked with who do evolve very nicely.
Yeah.
So
and I would say that research shows that it's not always the company. Sometimes you may not have any control over the ownership or the operators of the company, but that direct management can have an effect on that employee and their buy-in, their accountability, all of that, just by showing that they care about them, making sure those open lines of communication are there.
Right, that's a good point. The supervisor, the lead supervisor, the person that is directly in charge of that 4-man, 5-man, 14-person crew, whatever it is, that lead person is a huge key component in the engagement and the interaction with those people, because those folks look up directly to that person. They don't necessarily know who the CEO is, the human resource officer is, the president of the company, and they may not necessarily care who they are, but their interaction with that direct supervisor is key. And if that interaction is good, generally speaking, that crew of people with that leadership will be very successful, especially around safety.
Right. Even if the whole company as a whole doesn't buy into that department, that role can bridge that.
Right. And I see a lot of companies doing a really good job with this. The larger companies struggle with how do we manage this huge pile? Well, you break it down, you compartmentalize it, and they're successful. They have small pockets of people and doing specific tasks, and they're working to make everything better and work in a positive direction. And so they've just shrunk it down versus a construction company that might have 12 employees. They operate a little differently than a larger company.
Mm-hmm. how would you say that, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought there.
Okay, and I know that you're reading questions, and those that are on the phone are sending in chats and things, and so I'm tag teaming with you back and forth, but you got to read that stuff at the same time. Did you have a question specific that on something that we're already chatting about?
I don't have a question specific right now.
Okay, that's fine. If we had to have a pause, I wasn't sure if we had any questions. So the challenges will continue to come up into this piece. Another component that is worth throwing on the table is making sure everyone understands the differences between managing risk and being safe. And it's a big component that I think we miss. I know that I miss it from time to time in the safety industry. It's the first thing you say to your kids, make sure that you be safe, but you've never really had a conversation about that. And if you look at the definition of safety, safety is the absence of risk. If you were totally safe, there would be no chance that you could possibly get injured. And that's just unrealistic in pretty much everything that we do. So it feels good and I like it. Safety first and be safe, and we understand what it means, but make sure that we're having conversations about this internally. And I believe that adults that work for us, adult learners appreciate laying this on the table in such a fashion that you're going to deal with risk. You can't eliminate risk. Everything that we do has some element of risk, and you have to understand how to function with it. We're not telling you that you're going to do it without any chance of getting injured, but we have to have a conversation how to minimize that exposure. And I want you to know that I'm here to assist with that process. And if I don't know the answer, I will find some people to help you. But by all means, I don't want you to do something that's so risky that you are very likely to get injured today. So that whole conversation, that safety and risk conversation, is an important one to get them to buy in, and it's a role that we must accept as part of our responsibility.
Okay. What's your thoughts on compliance and safety?
Two different things in my mind. So compliance is a compliance with a rule and regulation. They stem from safety, but I like to really keep them separate. I like to keep compliance and safety. If we want to keep safety and risk together, frankly, I like to throw out the word safety and really keep compliance and risk management two different things. You could be in complete compliance, but still doing something that is at risk, or vice versa. So I really like to keep them separate and let them blend as you pull down the road. And we all can agree that compliance can cost us a lot of money and a lot of headaches, but it's a bare minimum set of standards for the most part. We should be well beyond that, and to feel comfortable with having conversations of let's have some lines in the sand on them.
Part of your creating your safe work environment, should that include your pre-ops, your workplace exams, things like that? Is everyone responsible for that?
Yeah, I know that's kind of just I don't know if that's a question from the group or just a question, to kind of tee up some conversation, but of course, I'm preaching to the choir with just you, Heidi. It's workplace exams, pre-planning, all those things minimize our risk. And it is super important. It doesn't take a lot of time, but if I can keep folks from having to improvise, right? I got all the tools I need, all the equipment when I show up on the job to do it, it's less likely that I'm gonna have an issue. And if they're starting to think of, oh, this is cool and this is acceptable to have this conversation with Scott, that I might need a man lift or I might need a ladder that's 18 foot long instead of 12 feet long because I'm getting on a building that requires that, versus me trying to improvise and duct tape two together. Now you start to really get some traction with people who are bringing some really good suggestions and ideas to the table through this whole conversation of this is cool. This is a really cool spot to play in, us having this back and forth on everything that you need to do this job safely and productively. And it's important to me, and it needs to be important to you.
What's your thoughts on a supervisor who maybe can't get through to an employee, not using another employee, but working with another employee who might be able to get that other one to have more buy-in,
Adjust the coach. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
John doesn't really relate to Scott, really frankly hates talking to him, but he does a good job talking with Heidi. So Scott and Heidi talk about a game plan collectively, and Heidi works with John.
Right. Yep.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely stuff we should be doing. And we talk about this and even in the enforcement side. I know it's not really around our topic today, but just think about the value in assigning the correct person for an enforcement piece. We've been doing a lot of this. How do we deal with an ocean inspection in different industries? Lately, you and I have, Heidi, and the biggest message has been plan for the inspection with a person who can handle the inspection. The worst thing you can do is put an employee who is really bad temper and doesn't want to have interaction with that inspection process as the person who's dealing with your inspection. So it's got to be the right coach to coach that mentality and coach that athlete that's out there on the job site.
Okay, we've got just about 5 minutes left. We've answered most of the questions. Just want to run through the bullet points and make sure we've covered everything. We've talked about the positive culture around safety, how you have to build that culture. In each person's roles, I know we've talked about the immediate supervisor, the employees, the management, and how everybody plays a role in that. You have any other last minute words that you wanted to?
Just the same message. Continue to hammer on this. It's unfortunate Wabi couldn't get on. Wabi's been studying this stuff for a long time as well. He'll get on another one, I'm sure. And he's always available to talk to anyone who wants to talk to him if there's someone on the phone that knows Richard. But this has been a conversation that we've been dealing with all along, and it's still stayed in a similar wheelhouse that we're dealing with people, and you got to be really good at dealing with those folks. And there's different personalities and different behaviors, and you got to figure out how to work with them or tag team with some other folks that are in your organization. But that's going to be the key to making sure that you stay focused on that stuff. And you're looking for total engagement, total buy-in, a tribe-like mentality, a mentality where this is the way we do things around here. And by all means, if you think you're going to put my teammate in harm's way, you're going to be in some trouble. And that's a mentality that's totally different than someone walking by me doing something unsafe and not even being willing to have that conversation. So it's that's really what we're looking for, and all of the top performing companies do so. They have a similar formula as a professional football team would have. It's all around that same mentality. This is the way we do things around here. So I'm always around. I'm always happy to talk shop. I certainly appreciate you pulling this all together, Heidi, and tag teaming with me as well as helping with the administrative piece. I know that that's a struggle, and I know that Sam's on the phone as well as helps you a lot. So there's a lot that happens with pulling these together. I hope this little session was useful. Feel free to reach out to us. I'm always interested in talking shop. I learn as much from you in the field as you could possibly learn from me, probably more so. So give me a call, give Heidi a call. I appreciate it. I have nothing further, Heidi, unless you do.
I don't. I put our contact information up on the screen. If anyone has any questions or anything that we didn't discuss in today's meeting, we appreciate you all joining us today and hope you have a great day.
Yeah, me too. Appreciate it. Keep up the good fight.